How many of you feel that law enforcement has entirely too much power? Follow me here. They can take the liberty of a person with less evidence than what it takes to convict and incarcerate a person in court. A police officer can see a person, decide to initiate contact, conduct an on-scene investigation, and find probable cause that a crime has been committed, which may lead to arrest, all without a warrant. The start of this whole incident kind of sounds like profiling to me, so let's get this out of the way right now. Law enforcement profiles people, and if they claim otherwise, it's an outright lie. In this episode of Office of the Patriot, I'm going to outline why cops profile people. Hello, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot. In this office, I try to make sense out of the nonsense of the progressive left. If you are a subscriber, thank you for your continued viewership. It is appreciated. If you are a returning viewer, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future presentations. And if you are a first-time visitor to my channel, well, congratulations on finding it. It's usually hidden by the YouTube algorithm. However, I hope you find the content worth coming back for. My name is Myron Ybarra, and I'm your host. The job of law enforcement today is more difficult than ever before. The current political divide between conservatives and progressive liberals has spilled over into the area of law enforcement, which has corrupted many agencies and officers within those agencies. As a result, law enforcement departments have made a number of internal policy changes in the area of public contact that have had a negative effect in the effectiveness of proactive policing. In the 1968 landmark decision, Terry v. Ohio, the Supreme Court determined that law enforcement officers could stop and frisk a person based on reasonable suspicion that a crime has been or will be committed. This ruling superseded the common practice of stop and talk, also known as consensual contact. Prior to this ruling, frisking a subject required a higher standard of evidence. This ruling was a boon to law enforcement effectiveness throughout the United States. And there's no one more famous or infamous, depending on who you're talking to, for endorsing and instituting stop and frisk than former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. In 1994, Mayor Giuliani expanded foot patrol policing policies to include stop and frisk in high-incident personal and property crime areas of New York City that had been implemented under the previous mayor, David Dinkins. From the early 90s through 2001, New York City saw a drop in crime that fell below crime stats of Chicago, a city with less than half the population of New York City. Mayor Giuliani's successor, Michael Bloomberg, continued with the stop and frisk policy. However, in 2013, a federal court in New York found under the Floyd v. City of New York ruling, the New York City Police Department engaged in racially biased stop and frisk policing. And in 2014, when Bloomberg's successor Bill de Blasio stepped into office, stop and frisk was all but a bitter memory for the people of New York City. So, stop and frisk, a lawful practice under the Supreme Court of the United States ruling of Terry v. Ohio, had all but been outlawed in New York City, and many major metropolitan cities followed suit. All because a single federal court found there may have been some racial profiling during stop and frisk encounters. Racial profiling involves a practice of law enforcement targeting specific racial or ethnic groups because of a belief they may be involved in criminal activity. This idea actually travels further down the rabbit hole with the racial threat hypothesis. The racial threat hypothesis follows the idea that of the larger group of minorities in a specific community, the higher requirement for law enforcement activity. Are officers really using these practices, or is it more likely that racial profiling and the racial threat hypothesis are loosely linking correlating evidence of profiling as racial bias by law enforcement because certain racial or ethnic groups fell within the target group? What's the target group? Criminals. And what's the primary driver of low-level criminality? Poverty. In areas where there is high poverty coupled with high levels of government assistance and programs like public housing and welfare, you're going to find higher concentrations of people of color. And it's not racial profiling if the people who are committing crimes in these neighborhoods are, in fact, people of color. We've established racial profiling by law enforcement is bad, and it does happen on occasion, but it's not systemic in nature. So where are the claims of racial profiling coming from? I believe they're being misinterpreted. In the start of this episode, I stated law enforcement profiles people, but it's not based on race. It's based on the totality of circumstances of the event. As a matter of fact, everybody profiles in the same manner. Yes, you heard me right, everybody, and that means you too. Let's say you're in your front yard mowing your lawn in the late afternoon. You know most everybody in your neighborhood, to include what cars your neighbors drive. While you're mowing your lawn, an early model Honda Civic hatchback with a rusted, dinged-up primered body, lowered suspension, and a fart can exhaust drives really slowly through the neighborhood. You don't recognize the car, so you slow your pace while watching the car as it's coming towards you from down the street. You get a close look at the car as it gets about 50 yards from your home and observe 4 Hispanic males in their late teens or early 20s, wearing predominantly red shirts with red bandanas tied around their forehead. Their heads are on a swivel, looking across both sides of the street as they drive up the street. As they get to your house, they all but stare at you for a few seconds as they drive past while you're mowing your lawn. You don't recognize any of these young men. What's the first thing that goes through your mind? Now, I can't answer for you, but I can tell you what I'm thinking. I'm making a plan to defend myself. I would likely try to remember the plate number of the car and maybe formulate a plan to run inside my house to arm myself and defend myself if necessary. What would you do in this scenario and why? Go ahead, take a couple of minutes to comment below on what you would do. Now, let's change the scenario with just one minor adjustment. Same vehicle, same young men. However, as they drive by you, you notice they're all wearing dress suits or dress shirts with a tie. They're all doing the same thing they were doing before, driving slowly and looking back and forth across the street. What are your thoughts now? If you're thinking that they may be door-to-door salespeople trying to unload some vacuum cleaners, or maybe the newest multi-service cleaner, or maybe they're religious solicitors, you're probably thinking the same thing I am. And that's likely what most law enforcement would surmise as well. When law enforcement profiles, they look at the totality of circumstance surrounding the event. Behavior, dress, facial expressions are all telling signs of what an officer may expect when he or she makes contact. This is done for personal safety. There are some situations and areas where you can go in relaxed, comfortable, with your guard down, and others where your guard is up and you're on high alert. This probably doesn't happen to you a lot, but this is a day-to-day occurrence for law enforcement when making contact with the public. Most people know that there are some places in certain cities that you just don't go to when the sun goes down. And we know this because we profile people and environments as part of our fight or flight reflex. And if you're feeling guilty about this, don't. It isn't racist or insensitive or any other demeaning adjective the progressive left labels conservatives with. It's for your safety. Your personal protection is your responsibility just as it is for law enforcement officers. So the takeaway is this. When an officer makes contact with you for whatever reason, try to put them at ease as much as possible. Now, I'm not suggesting trying to be best friends with them or giving up any of your constitutionally protected rights. What I am saying is just be courteous. And today, more than ever, that's good advice for everyone. This concludes today's presentation of Office of the Patriot. If you enjoyed the content, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share my channel on your social media. It is appreciated. And as always, have a blessed day and stay safe out there.